Every empire collapses for its own reasons. War, famine, corruption, invasion, these things come and go. But behind every dramatic fall, behind every burning city and every broken dynasty, there is one quiet force that destroys a civilization from the inside long before the world sees the flames. It's currency. Rome didn't fall in a single battle. It didn't die because of one emperor, one plague, or one invasion. It fell because its money died first. When the Roman currency collapsed, everything else followed. The economy, the army, the government, the people's trust, and finally, the empire itself. What makes this terrifying is simple. The same pattern is happening again today, nearly step by step. But before we talk about America or 2025 or the global system we use today, you must understand how Rome destroyed its currency. Because when you see the sequence Roman leaders followed, you'll realize why economists, historians, and major investors keep calling our era Rome, but on fast forward. So let me take you back 2,000 years, before the collapse, before the chaos, before the currency was debased, to the moment Rome made the first mistake in a long chain of decisions that led to its downfall. The silver coin that built an empire. Rome didn't become a superpower because of armies alone. It didn't become wealthy just because of conquests. Rome became the center of the ancient world because it created something extraordinary. The denarius, a small silver coin, simple, stable, trusted. For almost 300 years, this one coin powered the Roman economy. It paid soldiers, it funded roads, it moved goods across continents. It became the universal currency of the Mediterranean. When a merchant saw a denarius, he didn't ask questions. He didn't need to. It was pure silver, the ancient version of hard money. For centuries, it held its value. For centuries, people trusted it. For centuries, it represented stability. But here's the problem with every powerful currency in history. The moment politicians discover they can manipulate it, the collapse begins. The first cut. When Rome started printing money, in the year 64 AD, Emperor Nero faced a problem politicians still face today. Huge government spending, huge military expenses, not enough money to cover any of it, but instead of cutting spending or raising taxes, both unpopular choices, Nero discovered a faster, easier, more dangerous shortcut. He reduced the silver content of the denarius, not by much, just a little, just enough so the government could mint more coins using the same amount of silver. But that tiny decision set Rome on a path it could never escape. Because once Nero debased the currency, every emperor after him learned the same lesson. Why raise taxes when you can just print more money? The denarius that once carried 100% silver slowly dropped to 90%, 80%, 70%, 50%, and no one noticed at first. The coins looked the same, they felt the same. They carried the same stamp of the emperor, but they were no longer the same. Rome was quietly inflating its way toward collapse. The army demanded more, and the currency paid the price. By the 200s AD, Rome faced endless military threats, Germanic tribes, internal rebellions, civil wars, border fights from Britain to Syria. To survive, emperors needed a larger army, higher salaries, and more bribes to stay in power. But where would the money come from? Rome turned again to the same trick, debased the currency even more. By the time of Emperor Caracalla, the denarius had lost nearly half of its silver. But Caracalla needed more money. So he created a new coin, the Antoninianus, supposedly worth 2 denarii, except it contained only 1.5 times the silver, then 1 time, then half, then a trace, and eventually 0%. A currency that had once been pure silver became little more than a thin metal disc dipped in silver coloring. By 270 AD, the Antoninianus contained less than 2% silver. That's not debasement, that's hyperinflation. The exact same thing you see in Venezuela, Zimbabwe, Lebanon, Argentina, and many fear eventually in the US dollar. The results for Rome were catastrophic. When money dies, empires die. Hyperinflation is not just an economic event. It is a social, political, and civilizational event. When Rome's money collapsed, soldiers demanded payment in food instead of coins. Merchants refused imperial currency. Prices doubled, tripled, and exploded. Savings were erased. Trade collapsed. The government lost the trust of its people. Riots spread across major cities. The borders became impossible to defend. The empire split into 3 separate governments because no one believed in the same currency anymore. Rome didn't fall because barbarians were too strong. It fell because Rome was too weak. And the weakness began with the death of its money. No army can save a country whose currency is rotting from the inside. The pattern that terrifies economists today. Here's the part that makes this story more relevant than ever. Every empire destroys its currency in the exact same sequence. Government spending explodes war costs. Increased tax revenue falls short. Politicians choose the easy path. Currency gets debased, inflation rises, people lose trust. The empire collapses. Rome followed this pattern. The Ottoman Empire followed it. China's dynasties followed it. France before the Revolution followed it. Germany before WW2 followed it. And modern economists warn the United States is entering phase 3. If you want to understand how Rome actually fell, don't start with the barbarians at the gates. Don't start with the wars. Don't start with the emperors. Start with their money. Because long before Rome collapsed on the battlefield, it collapsed on the balance sheet. The truth no one tells you is this: empires do not fall when enemies attack. They fall when their currency breaks. And Rome's currency didn't collapse overnight. It followed the exact same 3-phase pattern that every major civilization goes through when its money begins to rot from within. Phase 1, expansion through sound, money. Phase 2, corruption through dilution. Phase 3, collapse through loss of trust. And Mawa, right now, the United States is drifting dangerously into the same phase 3 Rome could never escape. Phase 2, phase 3, where Rome crossed the point of no return. By the time Rome entered the 3rd century, it had already weakened its currency for nearly 150 years. The initial small adjustments, shaving coins, reducing silver purity, seemed harmless at first. People accepted it. Markets didn't react. Merchants continued business. And that false sense of safety is exactly what destroys civilizations. Because currency destruction works like erosion, slow, silent, invisible, until suddenly the ground disappears beneath your feet. Let's go inside Rome's collapse step by painful step so you can see exactly where the modern world is standing today. Step 1, the silver disappears. The Roman denarius had once been one of the strongest currencies in the world. 95% silver, trusted everywhere, respected universally. But during the imperial crisis, 95% silver dropped to 80%, then 80% dropped to 50%, then 50% dropped to 5%, then 5% dropped to 0%. And by the time of Emperor Gallienus, the silver coin had so little silver that you could bend it between 2 fingers. People joked that the only silver left was in the emperor's imagination. But there was nothing funny about what came next. Step 2, prices erupt like a volcano. When money loses purity, it loses purchasing power. When it loses purchasing power, prices explode. And this is exactly what happened. Where a soldier once earned stable wages, now his salary couldn't even buy basic food. Bread prices doubled, then doubled again, then doubled again. Inflation didn't rise, it detonated. The Roman government responded the same way every collapsing government responds. They made more coins, then more, then more, then more, each one worth less than the last. The more they printed, the more prices rose. The more prices rose, the more they printed. This death cycle is unstoppable once it begins. Step 3, the public finally realizes our money is worthless. A currency doesn't collapse when it loses silver. It collapses when people lose faith. And that is exactly what happened. Merchants stopped accepting Roman coins. Markets refused them. Provinces demanded taxes in gold. Rome itself became unable to pay soldiers in anything meaningful. When a soldier's salary can't buy food, he will not defend the borders. This single moment, when confidence dies, is the true economic collapse. The violence, the invasions, the civil wars, all of that came after the money died. Step 4, the empire breaks into fragments. By 260 AD, the destruction of Rome's currency caused something no military enemy had ever accomplished. Rome split in 3. The Gallic Empire in the west, the Palmyrene Empire in the east, the Roman core in the center. The empire fractured because its economy fractured. Money is the glue that holds a nation together. When that glue dissolves, the nation dissolves with it. And make no mistake, once an empire reaches this point, there is no going back. Now let's fast forward to today. Are we in phase 3 again? If you place Rome's timeline beside America's timeline, the patterns match too perfectly to ignore. Rome, 250 AD, rapid money expansion, falling silver content, exploding prices, military overreach, political division, US 2025, $34 trillion debt, unlimited currency, printing, interest rates crushing the economy, dollar losing global dominance, political polarization at extremes. You cannot look at this and say the patterns are unrelated. They're the same pattern with different costumes. And this is the heart of Retrofund's warning. Every empire in history collapsed when its money collapsed. Money collapses not because of enemies, but because of internal decay. And every collapse follows the same 3 phases. Right now, the US dollar is entering the phase Rome couldn't escape. Phase 3, when trust evaporates. But there is still one more thing we need to uncover before we can understand where we are in the cycle, and why history says the next decade will be unlike anything we've ever seen. And that leads us to the final chapter. If you want to know how an empire ends, don't look at its armies. Don't look at its politicians. Don't look at its enemies. Look at its money. Because when a currency loses trust, the entire civilization follows it into the abyss. Rome entered this final phase slowly, then all at once. And Mawa, the uncomfortable truth is that the United States is walking the same path, step for step, without even realizing it. Let me take you through the last stage of every currency in history. It is always the same, no matter the century, the technology, or the government. The ending never changes, only the timeline does. Phase 3, the Great Unraveling. Rome didn't collapse because of one event. It collapsed because people stopped believing in Roman money. And once trust disappears, every institution built on top of that money collapses with it. This is the final stage, the moment when a currency becomes a symbol of failure instead of a symbol of value. Let's go inside Rome's last phase so that we can identify exactly where the modern world stands today. 1. Money stops being a store of value. For centuries, Roman citizens stored their savings in coins made of real silver. But as emperors diluted the currency, the public stopped trusting coins. Savings evaporated. Business contracts failed. Pensions became worthless. People tried to escape the system. They demanded payment in gold. They used foreign currencies. They bartered goods directly. This wasn't an economic problem. It was a psychological collapse. When people believe the currency is broken, the entire economy becomes ungovernable. Now look around today. Rising inflation, exploding government debt, loss of purchasing power, central banks printing unlimited money, assets priced far above fundamentals. We're watching the same loss of confidence unfold in slow motion. 2, the government tries to fix it and makes it worse. When Rome realized its currency was collapsing, it did what every collapsing empire does. It tried to force stability by decree. They tried everything: wage controls, price controls, fixed exchange rates, forced acceptance of coins, punishment for refusing currency. All of it failed. Because trust cannot be legislated. You cannot force people to believe in money that is visibly deteriorating. Modern governments, when faced with inflation, react similarly. Interest rate manipulation, bailouts, money printing, debt extensions, emergency policies, artificial market support. Every intervention buys short-term stability, but destroys long-term confidence. Rome didn't understand this until it was too late. Most modern nations still don't. 3. The middle class disappears. Rome's middle class was once the backbone of the empire. Merchants, farmers, craftsmen, people who built the economy. But when the currency collapsed, savings vanished, wages lost value, prices soared, taxes rose, debt became unpayable. The middle class was wiped out. Society split into two extremes, the ultra-rich and the permanently poor. This is the defining sign of a dying civilization: polarization through currency decay. Now compare with today: housing unreachable, food inflation, rising wealth gap, widening, debt levels exploding, young generations priced out of opportunity, the middle class is shrinking, just like Rome. 4. The empire turns inward, not outward. As the economy deteriorated, Rome began focusing less on external threats and more on internal control. Instead of expanding, it tried to manage decline. More bureaucracy, more regulation, more surveillance, more taxation, more internal policing. The entire system redirected its energy towards survival instead of growth. This is exactly how late-stage empires behave. Their creativity dies, their innovation slows, their culture fractures, their politics become hostile, their institutions stop working, money collapse causes a societal collapse. 5. Finally, on show, the moment of breaking. It never happens gradually. Economies erode slowly, then something snaps suddenly. For Rome, it was a combination: a military that could no longer be paid, provinces refusing to send supplies, markets refusing Roman coins, civil uprisings, border collapse. No single event destroyed the empire. The currency did. Everything else was a symptom. When the final loss of confidence arrived, Rome didn't fall. It disintegrated. And that's how currency collapses always end. Not with a bang, but with widespread abandonment. Now look at the parallel. The United States in 2025. Are we in phase 3? Most people don't want to believe it, but the signals are the same. Record consumer debt, rising inflation, declining purchasing power, massive government deficits, declining global trust in the dollar, geopolitical instability, increasing reliance on money printing, polarized politics, widening wealth gap. This isn't doomer talk. It's basic historical pattern recognition. Rome tried to keep expanding while its money disintegrated. So is the United States. Rome ignored the warning signs. So is the United States. Rome believed it was too big to fail. So does the United States. But every empire thinks it's different until the pattern shows otherwise. What happens next? The final lesson from Rome. If the U.S. is entering phase 3, the phase where trust evaporates, then the next decade becomes the most important economic period of our lifetime. Here is what history shows always happens in the final stage. 1. Currency devaluation accelerates. Money printing becomes unavoidable. 2. Inflation becomes unpredictable. Prices stop following logic. 3. Debt becomes unpayable. Governments stretch the system until it snaps. 4. The global reserve status is challenged. Other nations begin building alternatives. 5. Social and political fragmentation increases. Economic pressure destroys stability. 6. People move their wealth into hard assets: gold, land, commodities, cash flow producing businesses. 7. A new monetary system eventually emerges. Old systems always die. New systems always rise. Rome shifted from silver coins to gold solidus. The modern world may shift from the dollar to something new, whether digital, commodity-backed, or multipolar. The final retrofund truth. Currencies don't last forever. No empire, no matter how powerful, is exempt. Rome lasted 500 years, Spain 250, Britain 105. The US dollar has been dominant for about 80. History does not care about opinions. It only cares about patterns. And right now, the pattern is flashing the same warning used by every civilization before collapse. Phase 3 begins when the money stops holding value and ends when the people stop believing in it. We are somewhere inside that phase now. Whether this becomes a slow correction or a historic collapse depends on what happens next. But one thing is certain, every civilization's money collapses the same way. Rome showed us the blueprint. The modern world is replaying it. And those who understand the pattern will survive what comes next.